And welcome back. Well, in the previous video, if you're watching these in order, you'll remember that we did the MagnaFlow install, which is the replacement muffler. Well, in this video, I figured we would do a little bit of the Banks install onto this truck. Now, we won't be able to do all of the electrical because we need the engine in place to do things such as install the sensor for the fuel pressure, which that'll be this sensor here. This one goes up to 100 psi. Although we don't need it to go that high, and this is the sensor we'll be using to monitor boost pressure. This goes up to 15 psi. But I figured we would do at least as much as we could, and then we'll come back as part of doing the engine install and finish up the rest of the electrical. Now, to cover some of the items here, these are two items that didn't show up in the first parts video that we did on the Banks, and you'll see that what these are fluid temperature sensors. One is going to go into an aftermarket transmission pan. The other one is going to go into an aftermarket rear differential cover so that we can monitor both the transmission fluid temp and the rear differential fluid temp within the iDash as well. But just to kind of recap, so these are the sensors. These are some of the extension harnesses that we've ordered when we go to install these sensors. But what we have is an iDash data monster, and of course what they consider there. Let me see if I can get you the name on this one. This is the 4-channel analog kit, which you can see down there for firmware revision 8 in this particular kit. Now, along with that is the bus cable. You see, this is the B-bus starter kit. So this is the cable that's going to go from this 4-channel analog unit to the iDash. And it also comes with a terminator in the bag. We'll need that here in a bit. And we also picked up this ODB2 splitter, so that way we can split off the connection that we need to go to the iDash, as well as have a connection still underneath the dash for plugging in scan tools and such. And we also picked up this guy as well from Banks, and you can see that this is a single gauge pod that will actually goes on top of the existing side pillar, A-pillar handle. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to remove this side pillar A handle, as well as what I'm thinking is we're just going to remove this side plate, and this will give us the ability to kind of run all of our wiring in through the firewall, what we need from the engine compartment. We'll just hide everything kind of back here, and in order to get it up into the gauge. So let's go over, let me get you set up here in a tripod, and we'll just kind of go over the contents of these boxes here. So let's look at this, which is the 4-channel analog kit. Now, everything you've seen so far is actually sold separately. So the bus cable that you need to go between the iDash and the analog kit, you actually have to purchase separately. All of the, of course, sensors. So everything you've seen here is all a separate piece. It didn't come bundled with anything else. So this is the 4-channel analog unit, and what we're going to do is use this in conjunction with this. And like I said, this is the communication cable between this device and the iDash, and inside this box, and you'll see here in a moment, is the 4-channel cable that we need to plug our sensors into. And the 4 sensors that we're going to be using for this particular setup, as we stated earlier, we're going to have a fuel pressure, we're going to have boost pressure, we're going to have transmission temperature, and rear differential temperature. And you can stack a number of these together in case your particular application you need more than 4 sensors. But in our case, that's where we're going to at least start. So inside the box here, looks like we got some protective covers, some silicone caps. We got a couple of stickers, and of course the owner's manual. And of course that is the bigger part of the meat and potatoes of what's coming in that kit is that wiring harness. So this harness plugs in the bottom of this sensor module. I shouldn't call it a sensor module, but I guess you could call it a sensor module. Looks like they call it a 4-channel analog sensor module. And it breaks out into channels A through D in this particular harness, and then we'll use each one of these accordingly to plug into a particular sensor that we need. So this will be the cable that's going to run through the firewall into the I should say not through the firewall, sorry. This will actually stay in the engine compartment somewhere, and then plug into this sensor, and then we'll run the cables out accordingly. Now you could, I guess, hide this under the dash, and we may do that. We're gonna kind of gonna have to look at this and figure out what the best placement for all this is, but I believe even their install suggests kind of inside the engine compartment and up against the firewall. But it looks like you've got a pretty good amount of cable here where this particular unit can be mounted a pretty good distance from where the sensors need to plug in. Now obviously getting to fuel and boost pressure is going to be pretty close, but getting to the other two sensors that we need for transmission and rear differential temp, that's where we ordered some of these extension cables. These, I got 2 3-foot and 2 6-foot cables, and hopefully that'll be enough. If not, it's a simple 3-wire cable. I'm not suggesting that you do this, but we could always cut into this and lengthen these wires if needed, and kind of use their cable and just add some wire to it and make our own custom cable. Don't get me wrong, this is some nice cable, but I will say, just being honest here, that even though these are extension cables, again, I got 2 3 and 2 6 that they've got a pretty good price tag on them. So it would be just easier and cheaper if we need just to kind of cut into this harness and just extend these 3 wires out to any length that we need it. I'm not suggesting that you do that. Okay, now let's look at the iDash itself, basically the brains of this operation. There we go there. That's our unit itself. And I can tell you by looking at the back of this, because we have this termination jumper, and that'll come in handy in the instructions later. It means that we have a version 2 of this hardware, because that jumper is present and not like an empty bank where a jumper could go. Of course, there's the back collar for locking it into the gauge pod. And there's our ODB2 plug-in. You can see it just comes out to a little 4-position cable that'll go in the back of the gauge. So we're going to have 2 cables that's going to go back on this iDash. We're going to have the ODB2 cable, and then we're going to have this B-Bus starter kit cable that also goes into the back of it. So you can see where you've got a lot of cable here, where this cable would just go through the firewall. This could go out in the engine compartment, hook up into that sensor, and give you a pretty good length to be able to get to those sensors before you have to start getting adapter cables and such. Okay, and there's our install instructions. It looks like we have got a micro SD, and also looks to be a memory chip, a micro SD memory chip, and this looks to be a micro SD to probably USB adapter. That may be for data logging. It may also be for how you update the firmware in here. We'll have to look at that in a bit. Now, again, we won't be able to necessarily power this up and do testing, but at least we can kind of get the wiring run to the inside of the cab and get the gauge mounted into the pillar and kind of go from there. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to take out the bolts for this piece of pillar trim, and I'll just show you that here. Underneath these little plastic trim caps right here and right here will be 2, and I believe they're like either 10 or 13 millimeter bolts, one of the two. Once those are done, we can just kind of give this a yank, and this trim piece should pop off. So I'm going to work on getting this trim piece out of here, and then I'll bring it back. And what we should see is that gauge pod that we have should just snap over the cover of this, and they give us a replacement hardware mounting screw that comes inside this gauge pod. And where is it at? There it is. And just a little bit longer in length to accommodate having this on the outside of that existing piece. So what I want to do is get that trim off, kind of mate this up to where it's going to go, and see where we need to drill just a couple of small holes through this piece, which will probably end up maybe right about in here somewhere, and then we can kind of come in with our wiring from underneath the dash, come up to the side of here and feed it through here, and then finally into the back of that gauge. But let me get this off next, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got our trim piece removed. Again, it was just those 2 bolts underneath those caps, and you just kind of give this thing a little bit of a firm tug, and that little clip should release. So their little gauge pod is supposed to work with this make, model, and trim a truck, and it looks like, from what I can gather, we're going to have to take this trim piece off, this little cover piece, because it's going to get in the way. Let's see, you should just be able to pull this out of there. It does have a little, sorry, just to show you here, it's got a little piece in the back that kind of holds that in place. I may have to cut that, because what I'm looking at here is that this is going to go over this, and of course we can't have that close up because we need the opening to put the bolt through. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to trim off this little tail piece of plastic right here and just take this little plastic cover off. One moment. Okay, sorry about that. Again, just remove that little cover door, but it is in such a way, if we have to, we can just feed it back in and hook it back up. It just won't be self-retaining any longer. But it looks like this piece is just going to go on top of this piece, and then that's what they give us that extra long screw for, is to be able to kind of bolt all this back together. So other than that, you know, there's no side clips or anything else that come with this to secure it. It's just secured by the single. And the color match is close enough that this is, they say this is paintable, but that's close enough in my opinion. I don't see the need to paint it. But what I wanted to do was install it like this and kind of get an idea. That's where the gauge is going to be. And now we can mark this trim piece through here and kind of just basically line up where we need to drill a couple of small holes to run some cabling. So let me go do that. Let me go grab a Sharpie. I'm going to make a mark here, and I'm going to drill 2 holes. Probably, man, I may just drill one big one enough to get that cable through, and of course the cable that we need to get through for the 4-channel analog kit. So let me go take care of that. I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our access hole drilled at this point. Again, just a little bit of Sharpie. That's kind of where the roundabout center of their pod ended up. You can see if you just line it up there, you can see it down in there. That should give us more than enough access to get our gauge and everything in. Line that up. And of course, just a step bit, small step bit, makes pretty short work of drilling through this plastic arm here. And that gives us more than enough room to get our 2 cables through that we're going to need, plus gives us a little bit of free space in there. It's plastic. The edges aren't very sharp on this, so I'm not concerned with needing to put a grommet through there. The wiring is also protected and has its own rubberized sleeving on it, so we should be okay from the standpoint that nothing should chafe through that wire. But what we need next is our gauge. And we now know that we're dealing with, again, a version 2, just because we've got our jumper there. And you can see that we've got a 4-pin connector. That's going to be the connector we use for our ODB. I'm sorry, OBD. I keep saying it backwards. I apologize. For some strange reason, I've got that backwards in my head. And yep, that matches up. That other 6-pin connector matches up with the 6-pin connector off our B-Bus starter kit. And now what we need to do is, I guess we can go ahead and see about loosely kind of getting this installed, because what I find with these gauges is that normally once you get them installed into here, then generally you kind of leave them a little bit loose, you know, reinstall this into the A-pillar and just kind of, you know, turn this left or right to kind of suit your view angle. But we'll loosely get it in there and kind of tighten it up from there. But you can see that's a pretty tight fit into there, which I kind of figured this was going to happen. I've seen this happen to others. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get me a little bit of sandpaper and kind of sandpaper around the inside of this lip until at least this will fall in place a bit better. And I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So yeah, that was it. Didn't take much. Just a couple of passes with some 150 grit. And that just helped to kind of widen it up a little bit, smooth things out. Now you can see that that gauge fits in there nice and securely. And then what we can do now is take our back lock ring, drop that in place like that, and inside the kit that comes with all the stickers and the goodies and the USB in the memory stick and the USB adapter, they've got these little nylon threaded inserts that can just spin over the studs in the back of the gauge. And no need to go, you know, 800 foot-pounds of torque on these, because they're just, like I said, nylon slash plastic. And it's not going to take much to hold this gauge in, you know, finger tight. Feels like that's like more than enough. Like I said, and once we get it in there, we may have to kind of loosen that up and shift that maybe left or right, something along that nature. But again, pretty straightforward, pretty nice, pretty convenient to have the pod molded to the A-pillar trim. And of course, and inside of the kit, you get this big thank you with the install instructions telling you that it's for all the 2008 plus ODB2 CAN bus vehicles, and they give you some QR codes that you can scan to get to the install guides and such. And of course, we won't be, like I said, we won't be able to finish the install because we can't power it up just yet, but that'll be one of the things that we need to finish up upon startup of the vehicle. So what I'm going to do next is bring you inside the cab of the truck here. We're going to see about getting our ODB2 cable run. Let's go ahead and just take the tie wraps off of this while we're here. I mean, why not? Okay, got it. And then we'll also go ahead and get this cable prepped. Again, this is our B-Bus starter kit, as you can see there. And in case you're wondering, no, this was not sponsored in any way, shape, or form by Banks. We did not get a discount code when I ordered the first round of equipment. When I ordered the temperature sensors, I did see another creator online that was offering a discount code at one point, so I was able to use at least a discount code to get the temperature sensors and the extension cables. And no, unfortunately, I do not have a discount code to post to this video. All right, so that's what we need there. Of course, that'll be the piece that plugs into the adapter. And since we only have one of these, what will happen is the other side of the adapter, which I believe is that side there, will end up just getting, actually it's this one here, well this side here will end up just getting this terminator to let the system know that there isn't another one of these to look for. Now if we had multiple, then we would stack them together, and I believe the last one in the chain would end up getting that terminator. Okay, let me do this. Let me go ahead and get this all cables unraveled here and get our splitter unraveled, or out of the box as well. Make sure that I'm going to look over this manual real quick and make sure there isn't anything that we need to set. It's a pretty basic install because it's only the one gauge, the one 4-channel analog module. So I think we're pretty much, I will verify this, but I'm going to go through and look and make sure that we're set as far as our termination jumpers and such. So let me do a little bit of reading here real quick, and I'll bring you back when we're back inside of the vehicle. One moment. And of course you can see there, failure line cap, starter cable can O-ring failure. So there's when you're stacking multiple modules together or you're putting that terminator in. Sure, the OBD2 cable is not plugged into the OBD2 port. Rotate the locking tabs counterclockwise to the unlock position. So that's the way it's giving you some steps to make sure that you follow based on when you're, stacking new modules together, unlocking modules, so on and so forth. Nice. And this is inside of the 4-channel analog kit. Okay, so let me have a quick look at this, and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So this is the manual for the B-Bus starter kit. So I just want to show you that page there. This is kind of what we're going to be doing here. You can see the Terminator jumper, iDash hardware revision 2 only. So we got our termination jumper there. We're going to have our ODB2 cable. We're also going to have this cable which goes through the firewall, eventually hooks up to this B-Bus module, and the B-Bus module will have the terminator and then the wiring harness. So that's the wiring diagram we'll actually be following for this install. So it's a B-Bus simple network. We got one of these and one of these, but as you go through this manual, they've got various different setups based on how many iDash units you're going to have and how many of these modules you could have as well. So and they give you examples inside of the manual here for how to run your wiring, and kind of this is what we're going to be doing here. We're going to split our ODB2 port, OBD2 port, and kind of coming up this way with our wiring, and then out to where the gauge pod is going to sit. So I'm not seeing anything that we need to change right now. And let's go ahead and get to it. I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we're just in the process of getting our Y ODB2 splitter cable installed. And it's pretty straightforward. You just plug it in your existing ODB2 port, and it comes out and breaks out to 2 ports. Of course, one, you can see it there. We just zip tied it to the hood release cable, just so it was also kind of, close to where the old one was at. Gives us an accessible port just right up underneath the dash, and, and kind of keeps it out of the way of, our foot operations from hitting it. Now, the second half of this cable, what we can do, because we've got more than ample enough room, at least in this dash setup, is just to take this cable like this, come up into the dash, follow a main wiring harness, which is this harness here, straight up. We'll zip tie it in a few more spots, And then that'll give us the ability to plug in this cable into the other half of that, which then gets plugged into the iDash. Now, to be fair, you don't, at least in this setup, we didn't have to split this. We could have just come down here and plugged straight into that port. And when we needed to use the port, just unplug the iDash, do what we need to do, and plug the iDash back in, because not having iDash there isn't going to keep this truck from running with its supercharger. It just means that we're not going to have our monitoring while it's not plugged in. But at least for convenience sake, it's nice to have them plugged in, and then, you know, still have an extra port right here accessible that we can plug into, so we don't have to keep unplugging and replugging this in. Now, chances are when we take it in for service work, they may not even see this other port. We'll have to bring it out to them, but they'll probably just unplug this and do what they need to do and then plug it back in. Who knows? We'll make them aware that it's there. So what I'm going to do, again, is just continue to route this cable, follow the wiring harnesses as much as we can, so that way it'll keep them out of the way of anything moving, so they don't get damaged. And then again, we're just working on getting this plugged into our Y cable, and then that will go in the back of our dash. But as you can see, they give you plenty length of cable to do this with. So let me go continue to route some cabling. I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you, I did loop a quick zip tie around that connector, as you can see there, because there wasn't really, from what I could see, something that would kind of lock these two together. This looks like maybe a little bit of a tab right there, but again, just to safeguard this kind of vibrating or coming apart. Just a real quick tie wrap there, and you can see we're just following the existing route of some wiring harness that's already going up into this pillar, and it looks like we got a nice area back here, back behind our towing control, where we can just take this, kind of get it up into here, and just lay it in place. And then what we'll do is, I'm going to tilt it here. We'll take our wiring and just kind of zip tie it to this main harness that you see here as far as our splitter. And it looks like, let's take a look down in here. Yeah, it looks like our section where our, sorry, didn't mean to blind you. See, yeah, you can kind of see it there, but what we'll do is we'll take it and actually just place it and lay it on top of this module, because there's a bunch of kind of unused nice space back here in the dash that we can just lay that connector up in there, and it shouldn't go anywhere, and it should be fine from that point. So I'm going to fight with this wiring a little bit more, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we've got everything tucked up out of the way. We just took the excess cable that we had that goes to the iDash from the ODB 2 connector, and just kind of looped it all together and just shoved it back here inside of this little space, and just zip tied everything from there. So we zip tied the bundle, pushed it back into here, because like I said, you got a nice big kind of cavity behind here to put everything. And with all the tie, and we did some more tie wraps around here, again just tie wrapping everything to the main wiring harness, so it kind of gets it up, gets it out of the way, gets it out of the way of our pedals so we won't catch it with our feet. And then we also have the now ODB2 port located kind of right there off to the side of the original. Of course, if anybody were just to unplug the original one and access it directly, that would be fine. That would work too. It's not going to hurt anything on this install. And if they forget to plug it back in, the worst thing that's going to happen is that the gauge won't work. Now, as we were kind of getting our wiring situated and getting everything ready, you can see we pulled out a pretty healthy length of wire here. And we'll do the same thing with the data cable that comes in from the 4-channel analog kit. And this is so that if we ever have to remove this trim and do any work to that gauge, you got more than enough slack there to pull it out and work on it at a comfortable level, you know, where you're not stuck, you know, right up here with only like 6 or so inches of wire. And as you can see, we've got a lot of, again, space underneath the dash up in this area that we can just kind of take the excess for the time being, do it like this, and just kind of push the excess down inside the dash here that we don't need. But then when we do need it, we can just pull it forward. And like I said, it's just for ease of comfort for future work that may need to be done by taking that trim piece off. But the next wire that we're going to need to run is going to go to the four channel analog module, which is this, basically the B-bus starter kit cable, which that piece we need to go through the firewall. Now, if you remember, we already have an entry point through the firewall that our positive cable is running into, because remember, we retrofitted this truck with an interior from a 1500 Sport, which means we added heated and ventilated and powered seats into this truck where it didn't have it before. Now, in order to do that, rather than trying to figure out how to tap into the TIPM or add stuff that wasn't there, for main battery positive, we just ran a positive battery cable through the firewall up underneath the carpet, and it's actually hitting a fused distribution block on the back of the center console, if you've seen it in the previous video. So all we're going to do is we're going to utilize, you know, some previous work we've done and hopefully save ourselves some grief. And if we come out here to the front of the truck, you can actually see where that battery positive cable goes through the plate, and there is a bushing in there, but it goes through a plate that is also would have been used for a clutch if this truck would have come with a clutch. But since it didn't, we just utilized that plate. We drilled a hole through it, added a grommet to it when we ran that positive cable, and I think we might have just enough space in that grommet to kind of push this cable through it as well. So that's what I'm going to attempt. I'm going to try to get that pushed through there, and then that will give us this cable, which will then just kind of lay outside of here until at least we get the engine installed and we're ready to complete the sensor installs. So let me get to work on this cable and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we're just in the process of getting the cable routed for the 4-channel analog unit. And although we're not going to install this right away, I want to go ahead and install the terminator, because this came separate from this inside that bag, that B-bus starter kit. And I don't want to potentially lose this because we need it. But just like this pamphlet that came with that 4-channel analog kit shows, with this lever up, where the blue pieces are lapped over the black tabs, you can see there. You see that little line, kind of looks like a line, little indentation. And on this cap, this termination cap, is also a line. So if we line those two lines up, that will fall into that one. And you could take this blue lever, this locking lever, push it down. You'll see that lever, that second line, now lines up with that, and this cap is now locked in place, and that O-ring is secure. So that's what it's trying to show you here, is that making sure that you get everything in alignment and that you get it locked down so those O-rings do their job. So with that secure, we know we're not going to lose that piece. That will be the end that we eventually plug into the cable. But I'll show you over here that we were able to get it to run through the firewall. You can see it there. That's our battery cable, remember, that goes to our heated and ventilated seats, as well as powered seats, and that's our cable for our 4-channel analog unit. We're just going to kind of place this off to the side. I may put a little piece of painter's tape on that just to keep any crud from getting to that connector. But again, that'll be connected to that unit once we have the engine in here and we're to the point that we're ready to do all the wiring for the sensor and such. But just wanted to show you that real quick. We were able to get that through the firewall, and again, just want to go ahead and install that terminator onto that unit so that we don't misplace it. But I'll bring you back for the next piece. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we're just getting our first piece of trim, just getting our wiring looped through the hole that we made. And because of the way this mounts, we should actually be able to even just kind of snap this in place and then put our second gauge pod over this. Let's go ahead and get this remounted, because remember, there's a little catch that right there in the center, there we go, that clips into. And then our wiring here, as you can see, comes out of our pillar like we wanted, and then we can just plug it into the corresponding, looks like 4 and 6 pin connectors on the back of our gauge. So we're going to go ahead and do that now, and then I'll bring you back, but need both my hands for this one. So let me get these connected, I'll bring you right back. And welcome back. So just to show you our connections there, we got our 4 pin and our 6 pin. They both lock in the up position, meaning that the release tabs are both facing up towards the top of the gauge. So now what we can do is see what we want to do about situating our excess wiring. Like I said, we should be able to take the excess and just kind of shove it back into here, because look, again, there's plenty of space down here for the wiring to go. And then once we get enough of this fed in, we can then just take kind of this gauge pod here, lift it up, get it into position, and then secure it. But before we do that, we just kind of want to place it up here and kind of look at how our gauge is sitting and figure out how we need to rotate it. So since I kind of need both my hands to do this, so let me push this wiring back and I'll bring it back in a moment. And welcome back. So you can see with our pod installed and now sitting on a column, you can kind of see how we're tilted a little bit off at an angle. So what I want to do is just straighten that up, so we're, I'm looking at the readout straight up and down from the driver's side. So what I'm going to do is just loosen up those 2 little mounting clips on the back and give this gauge just a kind of a slight rotation, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we kind of got our gauge straightened up a bit more. It's a little bit more up and down. We may have to kind of fine tune that a little bit, but that's easy enough done. So I ended up cutting this upper tie wrap loose and just kind of pulling the excess through to get this to fall into place, and then just taking the excess and pushing it back into this corner back here. Again, you got a nice little area back here, and that'll work, because that'll give us our slack we need, and again, in the event that we have to pull that apart. But you can see the little gauge pod does a nice job of fitting behind the molding, just like the factory one does. It fits in here. It's not really that intrusive on anything. It actually fits in here quite nicely. I do see an edge down here that we need to address. Look like we got a far edge kind of popping out there a little bit, so I got to work on getting that into position before we put our mounting screw in, which will go through this handle and bolt in. Just be mindful and remember that they gave you a Phillips bolt. Once I can find what I did with it here, but they gave you a Phillips screw to put in there instead of the those are the bolts that were in it. It had 2 of these originally, so the bottom one is going to be the screw they gave you, and the top one will go back with a factory bolt. But let me work on getting this secured, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, as you can see, we're in. We got our lower replacement screw installed, which again goes through the pod adapter plus the original trim, and of course we put our top bolt back in as well. Now, a word to note on this one is that getting this screw to line in was a bit of a bear, I'm not going to lie to you. And what was happening was, you'll see right here where this pod actually goes down into the dash on this corner just a little bit. It's kind of almost pretty much even with the bottom of the dash you see there. So what was happening was, I had the cluster up here earlier, but this wasn't far down enough, and you can also kind of trace the seam here and get it to line up, as well as the seam on the other side here as well. and that'll kind of gauge if you've got this deep enough, because it doesn't take much for this to be out of alignment, for that screw not to match up with the threads and then pass through the handle and hit the threads that are, you know, inside the A-pillar frame. So anyway, that's what I was fighting. I was fighting with the fact that this wasn't kind of pushed down far enough. But now that we've got it all installed, again, just to kind of recap our wiring, we've got our splitter on. We hung the second, what is now second USB port. Let me get you some light. Right here, kind of off the cable, off to the side. We've got everything tie wrapped and split up and running up this side of the dash where we got some existing wiring. And the wiring for the 4-channel, what will eventually plug into that 4-channel analog block, comes in through the firewall, comes up, runs along the same side here, and also just kind of runs in here and comes through the factory trim in the back of our Banks pod. Now you'll see a little memory SD card slit right there in front of it. That's what that little SD card is for. I assume that's probably to do data logging and to do firmware capturing, so I'll have to do some reading up on that one. All in all, at least doing this part of the install is not too shabby. For this make, model, and truck, they make everything plug and play from what I've seen from other installs. Very similar, very plug and play setup. All we have to do now is, once we get the motor in there, is get the rest of our sensors situated and get our wiring run, and then that's where the remaining of our electrical will come into place. We'll have this piece here, which will get mounted in the engine bay. Like I said, probably maybe next to the ABS module in this case. These will run out to the 4 sensor feeds that we're going to have, which again will be this is a 100 psi, which will which we will attach to the fuel rail, because we'll be running about 60 or so psi of fuel pressure. This is the 5 to 15 pound psi sensor. This will be monitoring our boost. And of course, once again, we've got the 2 fluid temperature sensor probes. One will go in the transmission pan, the aftermarket transmission pan. The other one will go into the aftermarket differential cover. Now, I would have loved to have gotten a Banks differential cover because they got a really cool cooling fin design on theirs, but unfortunately, they only make the differential covers for a Ram for the diesel line. They didn't have one that would work for the, of course, as you know, the gas variant that we have here. So unfortunately, I did have to go elsewhere for that, but I got the transmission pan and the differential pan from the same supplier, so they match. And I'll bring you those. Obviously, I will definitely be bringing you along for those installs. And I did check the transmission pan and the differential pan have a 1/8 NPT, which will accept these sensors. Banks sell these they sell 2 sizes. They sell these in a 1/8, and I forget the other size, but they do sell 2 sizes of this sensor. So be mindful. Other than that, like I said, as you saw, it's a pretty straightforward install, at least for this particular Ram. It is. What I'm going to do now is just take our side cover. I'm going to get that blinding light out of both of our faces, and just put our side cover back on. Usually what I like to do here is just take that lip on that side cover, get it started, kind of come in at an angle, get that started, slide it up. And then what we can do is, once we get it the rest of the way underneath this rubber trim, and then just push it forward. But I wanted to recap with you, and I'll go ahead and get that snapped in here in a bit. But just be mindful, again, the kit's nice, the kit's good. You definitely get what you pay for. So no argument there, but just be mindful that when you're ordering this, that you're ordering the pieces that you need, and to go along with everything. So for instance, the iDash was just the iDash. It came with the iDash and the USB cable, and that was it. So for the Y splitter cable, well, that was extra. We know that we wanted to go with the 4-channel analog kit. You saw that this came as a kit. but the cable to go from the iDash to the 4-channel analog was also an extra cable. Is what they called the B-bus starter kit, which came with this terminator that we installed earlier, as well as the cable we ran out to the firewall. We got the temperature sensors. We got our pressure sensors and our fluid sensor, as well as the extension cable. So everything, it's nice that it's customizable because it allows you to shop around for the pieces that you need, but be mindful that and I would highly encourage that you look through the install instructions, which are available online for all of this equipment, and just make sure that you got an accurate shopping list together before you go placing your order, because you may find out that you need a particular piece you don't have. For example, I'll show you one thing that even I didn't realize and didn't pick up, is that there's a mounting bracket for these sensor modules. Unfortunately, it does not come with the kit. It's a $20 additional piece that you have to order if you want to utilize their mounting bracket, which locks onto, I believe, that face of it and gives you a convenient way of kind of mounting it to a particular flange or particular surface. But again, granted, you only need that if you're going to use that mounting piece, but again, just be mindful of stuff like that. Make sure that you read over the manuals and what you got, and that you're getting all the pieces that you need. So with that being said, like I said, we'll get more into finishing up the electrical part of this and the programming of all the settings of this iDash once we have the engine in and we finish up the rest of the install. But I kind of wanted to at least get this together because it's just another item that we could go ahead and take care of and we didn't have to worry about doing after we got the engine installed. So this will be part 1, and then definitely we'll be doing a part 2 as a follow-up to this when we get around to doing the next piece of this. But with that being said, if you have subscribed already, I thank you immensely. If you have not, please consider doing so. And with that being said, I thank you much, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.